Remember, today's the day that me and Mrs. Smith will be ringing you, so look out for those phone calls because we really look forward to hearing what you've been getting up to in the week. Okay, so this lesson today, we're going to be adding decimals and we're going to be crossing the whole. So last week you looked at adding and subtracting decimals and you stayed under the whole. So you would add something like 0.7, add 0.2 would give you 0.9, smaller than a whole. Today you're going to be using the same principle of adding, but your decimals are going to give you slightly bigger answers and you're going to go over into the whole. So our place value is really, really important here. Our knowledge of what happens when we cross those boundaries is really important. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can do this at home, okay? But it's actually something that I'm really, really confident you'll all be able to do with no help from your adults at home, completely independently. Okay, so if I was going to, I'm going to start with an example, and I've decided to draw my counters, okay? Now, this is something that helps me to visualise what's happening when I'm adding and I'm in different columns. I've got different place value, okay? So I've got my ones, my tenths and my hundredths, okay? And I'm, to start with, adding 0.51 and 0.63, okay? And I want to find my answer to that. Now I know in 0.51 I have got 5 tenths and 1 hundredths. And then in 0.63 I've got 6 tenths and 3 hundredths. In both of those I have no ones, okay? There's nothing there. So I've just drawn little counters to help me see what is happening, okay? This is something that you can do on your piece of paper at home. You can use the squares to help you with laying it out, but remember that your columns are the most important thing. So as always, I'm starting from this end. I'm going to start with my hundredth column. Nice and easy. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 counters in total. Now if I move on to my tenths column, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now I can't have 11 counters in the same column. We know that. We know that from looking at our place value over the years and using our column method. We know that we cannot have a number bigger than 9 in a column, okay? So we have to do an exchange. Now 10 tenths are the same as 1 whole. I have 11 tenths, so I'm going to do an exchange here, okay? I'm going to exchange 10 of my tenths for a whole, and I'm going to have 1 tenth left over. So I know I've got 1 here, my decimal point, and 1 whole. So I'm going to take away, what's happened here is I've taken away 10 of those, and I've been given a 1. Now what Miss Goodman has just noticed is that for some reason her drawing has got a place value counter in each of those, which did not need to happen. So that's a little bit confusing. So we're going to do a different example in a second. But now I've only got 1 tenth and I've got 1 1. I've got 1 whole. Okay? So I've got 1.14. If I hadn't done that exchange, I would have written 11 here and I would have had a 0 here. Now that completely changes my answer, and that answer is wrong, okay? So it's really important that we're being aware of our place value and what happens when we are adding. I'm just going to do one more example because I had the wrong thing drawn in there and that's a little bit confusing. So bear with me. Right, this time I am going to add 0.42 and 0.76. So, just like I did before, I'm going to draw it out. So this time you can see me drawing it. So I'm going to start with my top number, 0.42. So I've got no ones. I'm not going to draw anything in there. Then I've got 4 tenths, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 hundredths. Then I've got 0.76. So I don't need anything here. Then I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 6 hundredths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, just as I did before, I'm going to go down my columns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Got 8 hundredths. Nice and easy. Then I move on to my tenths. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Same problem as I had before. I cannot have 11 in this column. So I'm going to again exchange, and this time it's going to look how it should be. So I'm going to take away 10 of my tenths and swap those for a whole because those are equal and I'm allowed to do that. So I'm going to count away 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? And I'm going to give myself one whole, 1, 1. Okay? So now I've got 1/10 and 1 whole, 1, 1. So I've got 1.18. Okay? Something that you know how to do. We've done this lots and lots of times with whole numbers, and it's the same principle. You just must watch your decimal point and you must watch what's happening in those columns. It makes a completely different answer if you're not exchanging. Okay? So now we're going to look at just laying it out in the column method, which is what lots of you know how to do. Well, all of you know how to do even. And I would have thought it's probably the method that most of you will use. So I'm just going to give you a quick example to just to show you and to hopefully stop you from making any silly mistakes. So we are going to do, sorry, I've got a very itchy nose today, my hay fever is very bad. We're going to do 0.143 even, 0.82. So I'm going to add 0.43 and 0.82. I'm going to go down my columns. So 3 add 2 gives me 5. 8 add 4 gives me 12. Okay, so I'm going to put my exchange up here, 2 here. I'm going to remember my decimal point and 1. So I've got 1.25. Now today you might have some answers where you don't always have the same amount of decimal places, which happens quite a lot. So for example, you might have 0.7 add, I'm going to lay it out slightly differently, sorry. 0.7 add 0.45. Now the way that you lay that out is really important because if you do it wrong, again you get a different answer. So you could lay it out as 0.7 add 0.45. Okay, columns lined up. You might make the juicy mistake of saying 0.7 and 0.45 and doing it like that. Okay, so it's really important that you're looking at your number and saying, okay, which column is which? So I know this is a tenth. So it's going to go in my tenths column. It's not going to go in my hundredth column. So I've got 0.7, that's 7 tenths, and 0.45, so I've got 4 tenths, 5 hundredths. So this one is correct. Okay, it's really, really important that you line those up. You can put a placeholder there if you need to, but I don't want you to get too muddled. So 5 add nothing would give you 5. 7 add 4 would give you 11. So remember that you exchange up here and you put your answer, and as always you're remembering that decimal point. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you've got 2 decimal points, 1 or maybe 3, the layout is the most important thing. It's the same with when you're adding, say, whole numbers, and if you're adding a tens number and a thousandth number, it's really important that you're lining those columns up correctly. So before you start laying it out, stop and check, okay, what numbers do I actually have? Have I got tenths? Have I got hundredths? Have I got thousands? Have I got all 3? What's happening? You might have a number where it's 0.04. So again, it's really important that you're putting that 4 in your hundredth column, not in your tenth column. You can't just ignore the fact that there's a 0 there and think, oh, well, I'll put it in my tenth column because it lines up better. Okay? So that's the biggest thing that might trip you up today, is laying those different things out. As long as you're focusing on your columns and you're laying it out correctly and you're remembering that you cannot have more than 9 in a column, you'll be absolutely fine. Okay, so have a go, work hard, and take some pictures and email them in to us. I haven't seen work in ages from most of you, so it'd be really nice this week to up that level of work coming in so we can really, really celebrate you and, yeah, make each other feel proud of what we've done. Okay, so we'll speak to you in a little bit. Have a nice day, and I'll see you tomorrow.